There's definitely a link between autism and identifying as trans. Researchers have noticed it, trans people have noticed it. So what's actually behind this correlation? Some people, like this Reddit user, claim that having autism makes you more open to accepting weird things about yourself, like being trans. But I think there's much more to the story. Today we're going to break down specific traits of autism and explore why this link might exist. So if you've been formally diagnosed with autism or have some of these traits, this video will explain why you could be questioning your gender or experiencing gender dysphoria. Welcome to The Metaphor of Gender. I'm Sasha, a therapist, and this channel is for curious people who prefer deep thinking over dogma. We explore identity, meaning, and how to live life well. In this series, Hidden Roots, we're exploring 7 different factors that contribute to gender dysphoria, and today we're focusing on how autism can shape gender identity and gender dysphoria. Now, let's begin with a quick note about the autism spectrum. People who qualify for an autism diagnosis present in many different ways. Some autistic people are completely nonverbal and need support for very basic daily tasks, while on the other end of the spectrum, others are mostly independent and can function largely unassisted in lots of areas of their life. I actually worked with autistic children for many years earlier in my career. And over time, the diagnostic criteria has broadened a lot, especially since the DSM-5 was published in 2013. So our cultural understanding of autism has changed dramatically in those years. So with that context in mind, I want to say that today, I'm mostly referring to people with low or moderate support needs, what the DSM calls level 1. These are individuals who need occasional support or accommodations, but are largely independent, especially as they reach adulthood. So, how does autism intersect with gender identity? One key feature of autism is social difficulties. Many autistic people approach relationships in kind of unusual ways or struggle with reciprocity. That's the back and forth, give and take nature of relationships. For example, talking a lot about your own interests and elaborating extensively on your favorite shows or books, and asking nothing about the other person's interests. People on the autism spectrum may also have a hard time understanding emotions, both those of others and of their own. Reading other people's emotions, body language, and facial expressions can be really confusing. And also, social context can be hard to understand, making it harder for autistic people to adjust their behavior in various situations. All of this can make it really difficult to make friends initially or to keep relationships going in the long term. So if embodied, real-time social interactions are challenging, a lot of autistic people naturally find the text-based and digital social world much easier to navigate. So here's our first connection: online spaces. Digital environments are usually much easier for people on the spectrum. There's no body language to read, and emotional communications, shared through text, emojis, or memes, can feel much clearer. Online, you're also more likely to be understood for what you think and say, rather than how well you fit in socially. Many online spaces dedicated to allyship, understanding yourself, and raising questions about gender and identity can be welcoming spaces for people who feel like outsiders. Even offline, gender and sexuality clubs may welcome those who are socially awkward or quirky. And of course, it feels like, this is where I belong. But why might trans identities be particularly appealing? Well, autistic people are often naturally gender nonconforming, and nonconforming in general. Why? Well, one theory is that they're not picking up on social cues, and so autistic people don't mimic their same-sex peers and end up breaking a lot of gender norms. As we discussed in the first video in this series, social pressure and self-doubt can turn natural gender nonconformity into identifying a different way, and autistic individuals often crave really concrete explanations. They are systems thinkers who like frameworks and labels that help them understand complexity. So the question of, why am I different from the other girls, could be answered by the idea, I'm not a girl after all. And for a lot of autistic people, when they get into something that really interests them, well, they really get into it. This is often referred to as an autistic special interest. And I've seen that things like gender identities, flags, pronouns, and all things trans can become a special interest. Plus, this is a special interest that says, hey, you can reinvent your own identity, and you might be celebrated for doing so. But there are more things. Online communities often come with very clear rules. For example, cis people must listen to trans people. Questioning someone's identity is always off limits. Pronouns are never up for debate, and affirmation is the only acceptable response. Rule-based environments make sense to people with autism, whereas messy, more subtle, nuanced, real-world social dynamics often don't make much sense. Now, so far we've covered how traits like social difficulty, systems thinking, and special interests make trans identities appealing. But what about gender dysphoria itself? Let's talk about sensory processing. Many autistic people are hypersensitive to touch, texture, sound, or light. Their bodies can feel like overwhelming environments. And it's really hard to feel congruent with your body when there's a battle raging between your sensations and what's going on in your mind. Then during puberty, when we all develop so quickly, get hairier, and our sex characteristics become much more prominent, this will exacerbate several core difficulties in autism: sensory discomfort, adapting to a lot of change rapidly, and a social landscape that gets even more complicated and confusing. There's also a correlation between autism and uncommon or unusual sexual interests, often called paraphilias in the clinical and sexology literature. And I think this just represents another way that people on the spectrum relate to their bodies and sexualities differently. And in my experience, this can be related to erotic desires for cross-sex embodiment that we talked about in a previous video. We've already touched on emotions, but there's a little more. People on the spectrum often struggle to name and interpret their emotions. And many have really intense emotions that are hard to control. And if someone can't pinpoint whether they're feeling anger, embarrassment, or fear, and someone else suggests, hey, this could be gender dysphoria, well, that might seem like the best explanation available. Imagine this: a young autistic boy is excluded or bullied by the other boys in his class. In the moment, he feels rejection and shame. Looking back and interpreting this through the lens of gender identity, he might think, well, I never fit in with the boys. Maybe I've had a lifelong gender mismatch. Finally, let's visit literal thinking. Many autistic people take things quite literally and struggle with metaphoric or symbolic meaning. They may also find it hard to understand things from the perspective of others. So how might this show up with gender? Let's compare two people. Leo is neurotypical and biologically female. Dex is also biologically female, but has autism. Both use he/him pronouns and present androgynously. Leo says, I know some people recognize that I was born female, but they use he/him pronouns out of respect for my identity. But Dex, on the other hand, might say, no, I'm not female. Trans men are men, and might take this as literal truth. So if a grocery store clerk uses she/her for Dex, it feels confusing and upsetting because the social signals Dex is using, like hair and clothing that are supposed to say, I'm male, don't seem to be working. This black and white thinking, along with the difficulty taking others' perspectives, can intensify dysphoria. And you notice how differently Leo and Dex think about things like pronouns. Many of the experiences that I've described, like confusing social situations and discomfort with feeling different, these are universal. But people with level 1 autism might feel uniquely burdened by them. So whether you relate to many of these traits or only to a few, I hope this has helped you connect them to identity and dysphoria. I'll also leave some citations below if you want to explore any of this further. And please like, comment, and share this with someone who might benefit from it. And hey, if anything you heard today made you feel uncomfortable or got you thinking in a new way, You can deepen this exploration by actually journaling about it. So here's a prompt to get you started. While watching this video, I felt the strongest reaction when Sasha said, then ask yourself this. My automatic thoughts at that moment were, then list 3 of your automatic thoughts. Now put this writing away and come back to this journal entry a few days later. Read your responses again and see if any new thoughts or reactions come up. And hey, I really appreciate all the comments that you guys leave on each video. I try to read them all myself, and it really helps out if you will like and subscribe to the channel. Okay, that's it for today. Keeping one foot in reality and one in possibility. I'll see you next time. And if you want to learn more about the roots of gender dysphoria, click here. This information is meant for educational purposes only, and not as a substitute for mental health services.